Welcome to Punahou, that is New Kupuna, a wordplay on ka Punahou. I'm Cristiano, your host, and this is a Talk Story podcast by, for, and about us, the Punahou class of 1969. It's a privilege and sometimes a surprise to reach this age and realize we are the kupuna now. What kinds of responsibilities do we take on in this position? So in this podcast series, we will be talking story and considering what our tapestry of stories might suggest as a group, maybe even as a generation. Our focus, what kind of legacy might we as Punahou offer? Our guest today is John DeFries, joining us from Kona. He has been in the news most recently as president and CEO of Hawaii Tourism Authority. This comes at a time when political, economic, and cultural forces have taken a long, hard look at our number one industry. John's long career has been built upon his expertise in the resort industry and tourism that have included his position as executive director of the Native Hawaiian Hospitality Association. And with this, he has comfortably assumed the mantle of kupuna as a spokesperson for Native Hawaiians engaged in developing tourism to sustainable capacity. Welcome to this podcast, John.
Oh, it's so wonderful to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's really a privilege to have you here, and I'm just so thankful that you are taking the time to engage with us in a kind of talk story, just just reflecting on what your life perhaps has been, maybe will be, and how we can think about our past, present, futures. That's a tall order. I'm sorry, but let's start with basics. And I understand that you grew up in Waikīkī.
The home was 2 blocks from the beach and a half block from the zoo, behind what is today the Queen Kapiolani Hotel. So my elementary years were at Jefferson. And school got out at 2:30, and by 2:40, we were in the water. So it was a pretty special place to grow up.
Oh, sounds idyllic. And so going to Jefferson and then being able to jump in the water right after that, in some ways, it sounds maybe like the water and the teachers at Jefferson might have been equal teachers for you. Am I putting words in your mouth?
No, not at all. I was surrounded by a number of family kupuna that kind of understood what life on the ocean was all about. And so those became our fishing grounds. And every Saturday, we embarked upon a fishing expedition that fed us all week. Great memories.
Yeah, wonderful. And tell me, were males and females of your family equally involved in the fishing and the preparation, etc.?
They were. Well, the men acted like we all knew better, but the women of the DeFries family had complete control of the situation. Thankfully, yeah.
And I wonder if you can because of course, we cannot necessarily share that life that you enjoyed. Do you have any particular kind of memory from that time period?
Well, there were a number of elders in our family that were steeped in Hawaiian cultural practices and hula in particular. And so every weekend, there was this intense presence of cultural expression. And when I think about Waikīkī and what it's become as a major resort destination, going back to the Hawaii Tourism Authority caused me to think about how fortunate we were to grow up there. And not lose sight of the fact that these resorts are important to our economy, but they're not more important than the health and well-being of our ocean, of our coral, of marine life. And those memories all came back to me while I was at the Tourism Authority. So I'm very grateful.
Right, right. So, with you being, head at the time of the Hawaii Tourism Authority, how do you balance those different forces from your experiences, as well as some of the economic demands for the state, et cetera? How did you try to create a balance?
Well, what helped the balance is that leaders in our community are becoming much more active and vocal about the impacts, both beneficial and adversarial, that tourism brings to their community. And hearing that voice and empowering that voice becomes a very important component and aspect of achieving that balance. The capital end of it, the economic and the financial end of it, is very well, very mature in that sense. The ability for communities to become active in helping give definition to the form of tourism they would like to see in their community is something relatively new. I couldn't be happier about it. It provides a creative tension that leaders are going to have to pay attention to. And, so I was grateful that during one of the gifts of COVID was the fact that the industry came to a standstill, which is a very dangerous thing to happen to one's economy. But it provided an opportunity for us to enjoy the islands that we grew up in and become much more sensitized to what we would like to see going forward. And so the balance is actually being put forth by the emergence of an array of community voices that are going to help give definition to the future.
Right. And I'm sure, and I assume that those community voices are not all in accord with one another, and that there is plenty of conflict within the local community.
Natural, if you derive your livelihood from tourism, you're going to view it one way. If you are not connected with it, you're going to view it very differently. And what's important is that all of those perspectives are at the same table having that debate, because that's how we get the balance, is by listening to everybody. And it's not an easy assignment. And I just applaud legislators and industry leaders and community leaders that have committed themselves to not only being heard, but being constructive about how we can move forward.
Right. It seems to me that, in contrast, perhaps, since when we were in high school and we just had a kind of this notion that of, progress, et cetera, we didn't question it as much as is going on today. But it seems like the word kuleana comes up a lot today. I wonder if you could say something about what that might mean to you in particular.
Those values were kind of embedded in the way we were raised. And today, I'm encouraged by the fact that you hear that word, you hear malama. We've always heard aloha. And we're hearing it from various parts of our community. You're hearing it on Bishop Street, frankly. That's important because the kuleana, in addition to being a responsibility, is also a privilege. So it is not a burden as much as it is recognized to be a responsibility that I have the privilege of having. And over the last 25 years, I've also been introduced to another Hawaiian value, Hawaiian term called koho, K-O-H-O-I-A. Koho refers to the fact that sometimes the kuleana chooses you.
Mm-hmm.
And on the surface, you may feel like you have a decision or a choice to be made. And at a deeper level, that choice has already been made. I have to be frank about it. That experience of koho I first had in 2001, and it happened to me again in the summer of 2020 when I was competing for the position at the Hawaii Tourism Authority. When I heard that that position was open, I actually went to Honolulu to recruit a couple of next generation executives to go compete for it. In the end, I was encouraged to compete for it. And as I got through that 2-month process, it became evident. Because what happened was when I looked at Waikīkī, I stopped seeing the hotels and I saw the fishing grounds. And when I saw the fishing grounds, I realized that over my lifetime, I had actually grown away from those values and lessons that we had as kids growing up. And so once I saw the fishing grounds, this sense of returning home, going full circle, taking advantage and making use of all the years of experience became an important factor in me going forward. And so that whole experience, I have to tell you, was cathartic for me.
Thank you, and that's quite moving, actually. The notion that it sounds like you felt called upon. Is that correct?
Yeah, and that would, yeah, and I would say, that's certainly not an experience that is exclusively Hawaiian, right? There are going to be a number of people that we reconnect with at reunion who can actually speak to their own experience about koho ia. They may not call it that. They may not know it by that. Some may refer to it as a calling. But yeah, when I reconnected visually with the fishing grounds, it was, I felt like a chiropractor had just straightened my spine. And and frankly, it was a whole new beginning for me. So grateful for that. But yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing from classmates who can relate to that because we have so many talented people in the class.
Right. Well, in some ways, what you're talking about is really part of the gestation of this very podcast series, giving all of us a space to either be interviewed and talk story or to share our personal stories with family, with friends, and because each of us has lived over 70 years, and that's a long time. And, I'm not saying that we're all smart, but I hope that we're smarter than when we graduated from high school. I wonder, and I really do appreciate you, talking about the education that your family gave you. I'm wondering, do you see Punahou as playing any particular role in that or in your Hawaiian education?
Oh, immense. I think I had my heart, frankly, set on going to Kamehameha. My mother went there, and I had my heart set on going there. In the 8th grade, I was turned down. And my parents were encouraged to have me go take the test at Punahou. And that altered my life experience. And when I look at the Punahou education and the life that we had there, it is among the great gifts in my life that I had, because I think I would have been so much more comfortable at Kamehameha in the 8th grade and 9th grade and so on. And frankly, I was very uncomfortable at Punahou early on. And as a result, my tribe became, and my safety zone became the football field and the basketball court, right?
Right.
And that's where the social aspect of it also began to mature. And then eventually, I felt extremely comfortable there, to the point that when graduation came, I actually wanted to go to the 13th grade. So, whose idea was it to stop this at grade 12, right? Right when we had it figured out. And so, yeah, when I look at that whole, and the identity, I think, of the new spring and Punahou, and what I can relate to is that excellence in education actually began on those grounds when the source of water was found. Because the people of that time would have known that that source of water was sacred. And in recognizing its sacredness, a whole system of learning and support and nurturing and regenerating that source to survive became paramount. And then at some point, the mission comes and is gifted that land by the Hawaiian kingdom. But I want to point out that we actually do descend from two really important traditions in learning. And one of them happens to be a very deep Native Hawaiian understanding of life-giving resources that that are sacred and needed to be treated that way. So and I couldn't be more grateful for the time at Punahou and the lasting relationships that we all have.
Right. And that is the point of this podcast, to reinvigorate the relationships, but also reinvigorate and to consider what kinds of gifts we have received over time and what kind of gifts we might consider imparting.
Sure.
I just like to explore a little bit more your discomfort initially at Punahou, because I think a lot of us felt that.
Yeah, it was, I can remember being embarrassed about the family car. And so I would have my father drop me off like 2 blocks from school. And that didn't last very long, because I then figured out that I didn't enjoy the morning walk as much. So eventually I got over that one relatively quickly. But, it's all, we're dealing with things as 13-year-olds.
Mm-hmm.
And when you throw a curve in like that is on a cultural level, kind of a shock to the system, right? And, but again, that's just part of being stretched, not being comfortable, and figuring it out, right? And I can relate back to, I might have said 10 words in the first quarter. and I purposely defaulted to Pidgin English, so nobody really understood what I was saying anyway. And it wasn't because my parents condoned Pidgin English; they didn't. But I think it just became kind of a defense mechanism, and eventually you kind of grow out of it, right? My horror at Punahou was the speech class, right?
Oh.
And I'd break into cold sweats and just had this fear of being called upon in that class. But again, you figure it out.
Right.
And during my lifetime, I had been called upon to deliver a number of talks, and I'm grateful for what I received there and subsequent to Punahou. So, yeah, you kind of figure it out, and I guess that's part of maturing and growing past your own inferiority complexes, right?
Well, I mean, but I want to give you credit for figuring it out really, really well, and becoming quite eloquent in your figuring it out. Not everybody has that. So really, kudos to the John DeFries who has figured it out and is able to speak in such an eloquent manner, especially on cultural issues and industry. So thank you for that.
Well, it's interesting because when people who don't know me see the last name, at some level, when they finally make connection with the fact that I don't really look like a DeFries, right? What is a DeFries? It's a French name, right? And then there's nothing that looks French about me. And I've always enjoyed people finally making the name connection with the fact that I'm actually primarily Hawaiian, and so we've had a lot of fun over the years with that as well.
Now, am I correct in assuming that when people were encouraging your parents to apply you to Punahou, was it because of your athletic ability?
That had something to do with it. It certainly wasn't my academic prowess back then, but it had to do with the fact that I was playing, youth basketball and was recognized that maybe I had something to offer. But yeah, that would be a primary reason why that happened. And again, when I look back, the influence that the coaching staffs that I was privileged to have, all of that, and the teachers that were there, I have nothing but gratitude for the whole experience at Punahou.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Can you, I mean, if I were to ask you, what lessons did you learn from sports? What were they?
Oh, becoming coachable is a big one for me. Because
but John, sorry to interrupt, but what do you mean by coachable?
Sure. Open to criticism, open to direction, open to improvement, right? Mm-hmm. Open to developing your fundamentals. And I carried that into the business arena, and not take it personally, and grow from it. And so, and then the natural outcome is being able to be part of a team, and that success doesn't come from individual performance alone. It comes mm-hmm. from individuals performing well for the betterment of the team, and that continues to serve me daily.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are big lessons. And then the other thing you learn is how to lose. It's like we all like championships and we all like that, and we all find joy in that. But learning how to lose and then turning that around and trying to convert that disappointment, that lack of performance into the next game is a life lesson as well. And so we had our share of losses and we had our share of wins back when we were there, and you learn from it all.
Yeah. I mean, I just think these are really important lessons. I love the coachability and that kind of thing. But if you were to put in a nutshell, what's the best way to teach somebody how to lose?
First of all, recognize and encourage them to feel the pain and the disappointment, the grief that comes with that. But you don't want to dwell in that vibrational field. But you don't want to deny that experience, because you don't ever want to feel like that again. And that becomes a motivator, right? But recognizing that there is, when you lose something, whether it's what we go through today, when you lose a loved one, when you lose a classmate, when you lose, it would be, we'd lose something if all we did was run right over that and not experience, not recall, not be grateful for having that individual in our lives, right? And that's an extreme definition of loss, but it is nonetheless important that we give ourselves time to grieve, and then convert that into gratitude, and eventually celebrate the fact that we had one another when we had one another.
That's beautifully said. Thank you so much, John.
And I say that because I lost two younger brothers, right, to cancer. And I watched that and that pain and the families they left behind. While I had no children of my own, their families became, a priority for me. I was not going to replace in each of those situations. I wasn't going to replace their father, but I was in a position to provide support. I still am. And I think that learning how to lose and in a dignified way of doing it is really important too. But I enjoy winning, frankly. So,
and just to you've really mentioned so many things that are really important and kind of life lessons, and I thank you for that. If you were to put in a nutshell one thing you would like to pass down to present and future generations as a kupuna, what would that be, John?
What I would want to leave is a sense of hope that along the way, that they hold on to a sense of hope, because the rest of it, with hope as a foundation, or as a cornerstone, I should say, they'll find a way to figure it out.
I just want to thank you, John, for sharing these stories and sharing the lessons that you have learned over the course of the years, your many, many experiences. It has taught me a lot, even in this one podcast. And so I really want to thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me. And if I can, I just want to make sure that as many of our classmates come back this June, because these moments will get rare. And it's important that we take advantage of it and reconnect with the spirit of 1969. So thank you.
Absolutely. And, that is what, that's what we're trying to do in this podcast. So I just want to thank you again. And we look forward to seeing you in person and hearing more of your stories. And really, it's all of our stories together that form this kind of network, this web of perhaps hope. So thank you again, John.
Appreciate it. Take care of yourself. Aloha.
Mahalo for listening. This has been Punahou, a talk story podcast by, for, and about us, the Punahou class of 69. I'm your host, Cristiano, with production help from Carlene Tani and Sue Au Doyle. I hope that listening to these interviews might prompt each of us to reflect on those pivotal experiences and insights that make up our own lives and to share them with families and friends. This is our responsibility, our ongoing legacy. So until next time, ahui o.